Hello everybody and welcome to the British Pine. My name is Christoph and today we are recreating the Young's Parti-Gyle. I'm a bit in a hurry and so this might be a bit hasty and I might look a bit tired because my daughter kept me up all night, but we're going to do this. I have this half a Sunday free and I'm ready for lots of calculations and crazy stuff. If you do not know what a Parti-Gyle is, basically I'm going to do one mash, one brew, but get 3 beers out of it because I'm splitting the wort before the boil, hopping differently and in the end getting 2 different gyles which I can then blend into 3 different beers. So what we're going to do is we're going to need the grain bill. Oh, by the way, my basis is a picture of the brew log from Young's from 2006. So this is going to be really accurate. I'm going to go as close as I can as usual. If you want more information on that, you can head on over to the link I posted in the description to the Homebrew Talk forum, where I gave all the details. I don't have to put it in the YouTube description that way. Alright, so we want to have a grain bill with lots of Maris Otter and 3.75% of Crystal 150. I used Paul's malting crystal this time because I had it in the shop where I bought my last order. I haven't tried it before, so no idea where it is in the range of the crystal malts I know. Warminster is quite complex, Crisp is quite caramelly, and maybe Paul's is in the middle, I don't know. So I'm going to mash in 2.5 liters per kilogram, and I'm going to mash at 67 degrees. This is just a single infusion rest. It's a bit more simplified than what Young's did. They did an underlet after some time, which is not specified, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to get very close, and then I'm going to start with the same amount that they do, 4.33 liters per kilogram. And for the amount that I want to do, which is 4 liters of the ordinary, 4 liters of the ramrod, and then 6 liters of the special, so that's 14 liters, I'm going to use 3 kilograms of malt. And so I have 7.5 liters mash liquor and I think 13 liters sparge liquor. So that's all done. I need to adjust my water, of course. I got some information from a former brewer from Young's about what they did with the water because not everything is specified in the brew log, and that's why I'm going to add tons of gypsum, tons of calcium chloride, and I'm going to use lactic acid. They use sulfuric acid. I'm just going to use more gypsum to compensate for that. They have a crazy profile that I'm going to show you. I think the top will be the Young's profile original. I adjusted the sulfuric acid that they might have used. I don't know the amount, I just know that they used it, so that the pH is 5.4, and then you will see my profile below that, which is very similar. I have more magnesium, more sodium, but that's negligible, I think. So that's just my tap water. Alright, so that's all done and easy. You can try to get as close to these profiles as you want. It's really just about getting a good amount of chloride and a lot of gypsum in there, which is typical for bitters. Alright, that's basically the simple part. And then we get to something more difficult because I need to estimate the amount of liquor, well, the amount of wort, sorry, liquor is what they use for water, the amount of wort and gravities that I'm going to get. So I'm guessing I will get something like 7 liters of each after the boil, maybe 8.5 before the boil, just from the amount of waters I use and grain. So that will fit in the 2 pots that I'm going to use, and then I'm going to boil them very slowly, so I have some evaporation. Young's has 10% or 9%, somewhere in between. They're going for exactly the same amount of gallons per boil that evaporates, so the percentage varies depending on how much they fill their copper, and also they're using 4 coppers. And they're adding water before the boil to dilute some of them really crazily, which is just chaos. So I'm going to use this much simpler, just 2 coppers. I'm aiming for the gravity that I need and not diluting somewhere in the middle. So hopefully everything will be fine. And of course in the very end I can dilute a bit if my evaporation is too large. Yeah, so 8.5 liters before the boil, 7 liters afterwards. I think I'm going to get something like 14 degree Plato in the first wort. So that's 1048, and then maybe 7 degree Plato in the second wort, that would be 1028, and I can blend all the others, all the beers that I need. So ordinary is 9.2 degree Plato, special is 11.2 degree Plato, and ramrod is 13.2 degree Plato. So all I need to do is get a wort that is higher and a wort that is lower than the maximum, and then I can mix and blend however I want. The colors will be just slightly colored from the crystal, really not much. I calculated that I'm probably going to get 13, 16 and 18 EBC, and I'm going to need to color at least the higher gravity one, which is also what Young's did, and I have both just coloring and some original Brew's caramel with 3000 EBCs at hand, so I'm going to do either of them. I will find out. So on the text here on the side, you should now when I'm talking about the boil, see the actual gravities that I got. Hopefully I will fit that all in. I have a notepad here so that I can, I have a notebook here that I can put everything in there. And then the easy thing is everything is going to be 30 to 34 IBU. That is an information I got from the Real Ale Almanac. And also in the end, the Real Ale Almanac tells me that special is dry hopped with Target and the Ramrod is dry hopped with Golding. I'm going to do that at the end. But for the boil, I just have 2 guiles. I need to type in the gravity that I get into my calculator. I want to use Fuggle and Challenger as the bittering hops. They use Fuggle and Golding. They use 2-to-1 ratio. They had very high alpha, Golding and Fuggle. But my problem is that my Fuggle is just 2% alpha acid, so I would drown in cones. It's a cone hop version. So I would just drown in hop if I do that. So I'm going to add Pellet Challenger just to keep everything a bit smaller in quantity. And I'm also going to do 2-to-1 Fuggle to Challenger, and then in the last 10-minute Golding for all of them. And I think they used 0.5 grams per liter Golding in the last 10 minutes, and because I learned that hop utilization is both better in a big brewery with aroma and IBU, not just IBU as I thought previously when I did my fullest Parti-Gyle. So I'm also going to increase the late hopping to 0.7 or 0.75 grams per liter, something like that. And the bitterness I'm just going to adjust so that I get, I think, 33 IBU in each of the 2 guiles. Alright, that would be everything. And then we'll see what comes out of there. I have a yeast ready at hand. It's in the fridge now because I wanted to precipitate. So what I did is I had a very tight yeast. I did a very small starter, then I did a bigger starter. Everything was working properly, but the yeast didn't multiply as much. And in the second starter I still had tons of drag. So what I did is I scooped up the top cropping, the kreuzen that was forming, and I kept putting that in a new container and did a new starter with just half a liter, which is not enough for 14 liters of beer. So I'm trying to get a bit more kreuzen out of my second starter and add that as well, just to get a bit more. We'll see how that works. It might be a bit little on the yeast side, but worst case scenario, I'm going to aerate it every day to make sure everything goes well. And I'm also going to add yeast nutrient at the end of the boil for both guiles. So that's going to be in there. It should be okay, maybe it gets low attenuation. And then that yeast, the Y yeast 1768, which I bought 2.5 years or maybe even 3.5 years ago, can't even remember right. It was a long time ago, so that was a special release from Y yeast. It's very difficult to get, but it's very likely Young's yeast, and it's adding just a very faint citrus aroma and accentuating the maltiness, which is really great. And they pitched at 18 to 19 degrees and fermented up to 21, 22 degrees, so something like that is what I'm going to do as well. I previously had the experience that Young's yeast creates a lot of esters that are very sharp in flavor. It's probably not fusel, but it smells like ethanol, so just, fusely, not that nice. And I might actually go below 21 degrees, something like 20. That's what I'm going to aim for. And pitch quite cold. I have a room for that where I have just our guest room. It's cold outside now, so I can really adjust the temperature via the heating. I'm going to do that and probably assume that 1 or 2 degrees higher is going to be in the fermentation vessels, which are going to be small, so everything should be minimal. Alright, that's pretty much all you need. As I said, dry hopping, I'm probably going to go for a bit less than 1 gram per liter. For just the special and the ramrod. Ordinary is not going to get some. So that's going to be really interesting. I have never tried all 3 of them from cask. I think I had the special, only the special so far. I have done a special clone before. If you want, you can have a look at the old video, which I did solely based on the data from the Real Ale Almanac and Brew Your Own British Real Ale, the 2 books. So we'll see what I get now, and then I think we're ready for the brew day. See you for the tasting. Bye. Alright, and here we are back at the bar cellar where I'm ready to test the 3 beers. Fermentation went really smoothly. This trick of mine to add the yeast from one fermenter to the other two after 12 hours worked like a charm. 24 hours later, well, after 24 hours in total, after brewing, I had really good kreuzen, all 3 of them, so that's really nice. I might not have really accurately scaled the yeast. If you remember, Young's puts less yeast in the weaker beer and more yeast in the stronger beer, which is different to, for example, what Fuller's does, where they have the same amount of yeast for all 3 beers. And then you have a different effect of the pitching rate in Fuller's beers, but it should be the same here. Might be slightly different the way I did it, but I'm just really happy that everything fermented smoothly, the beer's cleared very well, and I think everything's ready now for drinking. Right, where are the bottles? Let's get them. I will try the ordinary and the ramrod, easily distinguishable by color. I didn't want to put the third one as a bottle in here. I'm going to draw it later from the hand pump. Just going to have a quick cut in between, and that should be all right. So there's 5 EBC added to the ramrod via Brewer's Caramel, so that is a noticeable darker tint, while the others are very close together. There's a very, very small natural color difference between the two because there's just very little caramel malt or crystal malt in there, which causes this natural difference. With the Fuller's beers, it was much clearer and there was no added coloring or any black malt actually. So we'll see how the carbonation is on these ones. The bag-and-box inflated just the way it was supposed to be, so I know in the sterile bag-and-box everything's fine. I'm still suspicious of some of my bottles, whether they are properly cleaned or not, because I recently discovered that my competition entry to the Homebrew Convention's Best Bitter BJCP championship actually overcarbed after a few weeks, at least the last bottle that I had, the one bottle. I do not know if that was a problem with the whole batch, which might be then the tired harvested yeast that was not fine anymore, and this one also has a very old yeast in there. I bought the Young's yeast 2 or 3.5 years ago, so that's really old. Never mind all the chit chat, let's start. There is a slight chance of this one having, because it was Eastern Golding dry hopped with hop pellets, that there are some particles in here which can cause gushing. I noticed that during the filling that the foam was really loud. Let's check the ordinary bitter first. Perfect. I went for a very low carbonation that is more authentic to cask ale, so that's what I want. I'm gonna pour it heavily to get some foam. Lovely, and then the mouthfeel should be incredibly smooth. On the day I'm filming this, it's just 2 days before I'm going on a vacation to the UK, so this is a really good start to get into the right mindset. So let's see how this works out. Good carbonation, but let's see if anything gushes. Yeah, here it comes. So good carbonation, but gushing is usually particles, and in this case it's really the hops. I noticed that I think 1 day after bottling, after carbonation started to increase, I already had some gushing happening. Yeah, so I'm pouring in carefully, and you can see that there's also some foam building up, even though the carbonation isn't that much. So let's start with a clean, crystal clear, no, actually not crystal clear. It looks clear as long as you don't look into the light, but then it gets actually very slightly foggy, just this very minimal natural haze that you get if you do not filter this. Lovely aroma. So Eastern Golding in the last 10 minutes, that's probably what I smell here. But also a nice malty backbone. I used Maris Otter for this one, so this actually smells really with a solid maltiness, very little crystal 150. 3 point something percent. The mouthfeel on these low carbonation beers is just so nice. Very low ABV, so it just really runs smoothly over the tongue. I might show you the ABV here on the side. I think I have all the data. Very nice, smooth feel, very little flavor. So the smell is actually more prominent on this one, but that's typical for the very low ABV beers. Sweet on the tongue, and then settles down a bit of nothing, and then a good solid bitterness in the end. So this is 30 to 34 IBUs according to specs, I think. Mine was more on the 30 end instead of the 34. It has this long-lasting but very mild bitterness because it was just low alpha hop that they used, which really encourages you to keep drinking. It's one of the things that I really love about British beers. They do not have any sharp bitterness at all. There are some German lagers which are really attacking your tongue, especially in the north of Germany. And this one's just so smooth and easy drinking, while still having all the character, all the fruitiness and stuff like that from hops and yeast and malt. Really nice. So my capability of smelling Eastern Golding has lessened in the last 2 years, I think. And the reason for that is that I'm brewing a lot with it. So I used to be able to say like, oh, that's an interesting smell, that's like pear. And now I'm just like, oh yeah, Eastern Golding. For this one, it is pear. Much more than when I started brewing, I thought Eastern Golding was really strong in vanilla and caramel, but I don't think so as much anymore. There's a spiciness to it. That might be just the high amount of low alpha acid hops. Even at the beginning of the boil, they can keep some spiciness in there, some grassiness. It's a very, very nice spiciness in the terms of when you have a meal that is really just hearty, just full in flavor. And it's not this green paprika, green pepper bell grassiness that I really don't like about the high hop loads that comes from late hopping. Okay, let's see. This one has settled very slightly. It still keeps the foam. It looks like a bit like as if I put it through a sparkler. We have an intense hoppiness here that matches with the dry hop. Just a bit of dried fruits, I would say. The warm dry hop that I did is a bit different to the cold dry hop. Cold dry hop with Eastern Golding gives you very clean lime, and this one is more like a complex bit of everything. Yeah, difficult to say. You just notice that it has a strong hoppiness, not necessarily that there's one clean fruit coming at you. Luscious mouthfeel. Notice the sweetness. Really viscous. So the high gravity, similar to the Fuller's ESB, really gives you a lot. I have some nice spiciness from the hops that's really forward and long lasting on the tongue. Really nice. The bitterness, which is the same IBU-wise here, is much less pronounced because the balance is shifted. This is much more malty, much more hoppy, might be slightly more yeast driven than the other one, the ordinary, and it's really so full. This full feeling, probably lots of protein in there, that just gives you this creamy mouthfeel. Of course, the foam helps here. That just looks like it's never leaving. Yeah. At least I knew what to expect here. So this is pellet dry hop. When you just bottle it and you have particles in there, it can be a bit gushy. The problem was probably that I didn't let it sit for longer time. I added the dry hops after fermentation was completely finished, and then I put it warmer so that any oxygen that I accidentally added with the dry hop is driven out again. And I guess the particles just didn't precipitate completely, so there must have been some that went to every bottle. 8 out of 10 bottles or something like that had the problem. Now we come to the one that's on the hand pump, the one in the middle, the special, the one I have drunk before in the UK. Not that I remember though, that was 3 years ago or even more. And I'm going to draw that from the hand pull with new fresh glass. That one was dry hop with target but with cones, and cones are of course much easier to keep in the fermenter because they're much larger. So we see. Okay, so I might have spoken too soon because this one is slightly overcarbed, very slightly. It produces more foam without a sparkler than I'm used to, and it might be just a bit more prickly on the tongue than usual. But apart from that, it's really nice beer. Similarly, clarity to the weaker one, very similar color, so it's good that I didn't just put 2 bottles in there and then I wouldn't have been able to distinguish them. So the foam has settled very nicely. Spicy, well, it's very slightly spicy, but strong citrus smell. This is fitting to what I know from Target. Target gives a very clean, very realistic citrus aroma that always tastes a bit like Radler, because you're actually believing that there's lemonade in here and not just lemon-like hop. So when you think of a US hop like Cascade, you think of lemongrass, something that you can distinguish from actual lemon. But this Target is really just lemon, and so it can sometimes be a bit strange. I guess my dry hop of 1 gram per liter for both of these beer is a bit more than what Young's would do, but that's fine. I like to have things more clear. I have to say, do not smell anything else, because the dry hop is very noticeable. Lovely. Not overcarved, except for a very slight bit. Very little more than this one. So probably maybe just a calculation error. Okay, this is really nice. It does feel a bit more empty than the other two, because I do get the fuller mouthfeel compared to the weak one, but less than the strong one, the Ramrod. So the special is easy drinking, not thin, not too full, just the one that you can nicely chuck down. Very nice citrus aroma that is also slightly in the flavor. I do not taste the malt now, which is a bit puzzling to me. But then again, I tried the Ramrod afterwards. Maybe I'm gonna have a sip of the weak one first to recalibrate myself. Yeah, slight sweetness, very slight. Nice aftertaste, bitter finish. I'm not sure if I noticed the bitterness with this one. There's a bit of a very slight vinegar touch. So maybe for this one, my dry hopping brought in too much oxygen. That is possible. Or I didn't squeeze all the air out of the bag after filling it. So one of these two things is an option. That's a bit of pity. So there's no sweetness noticeable because the slight sourness counters it, which is sad. The slight sourness is very nice when you have an extremely strong beer. For this one, it doesn't really work. I wonder what went wrong there. It's a bit of a shame, but yeah. Yeah, very nice. Not perfect. I'm really unhappy with the gushing on this one and the slight acidity on this one. It's still puzzling me. But yeah, really nice Parti-Gyle. I like to have 3 beers there. But I would say I'll see you next time, and take care until then. Bye bye.